In 1927, Oscar Hammerstein and Jerome Kern created a musical that changed theater history forever. Hammerstein wrote the musical ShowBoat, which was performed on Broadway in 1927. ShowBoat is a story about a family that lives on the Mississippi River in the late 1800s. It covers many important social issues, including racism. This was the first time blacks and whites performed on stage together in America.
Oscar Hammerstein II wrote the musical ShowBoat. He was an American librettist, theater producer, and theater director of musicals for 40 years. He lived from July 12, 1895 to August 23, 1960. He won 8 Tony Awards and 2 Academy Awards for Best Original Song. Hammerstein was the lyricist and playwright in his partnerships. His collaborators wrote the music. Hammerstein created characters that seemed real. They had desires and motivations and reacted in realistic ways.
Jerome Kern wrote the score music of ShowBoat. Kern lived from January 27, 1885 to November 11, 1945. He was an American composer of musical theater and popular music. Kern was one of the most important American theater composers of the early 20th century, and he wrote more than 700 songs that have been used in over 100 stage productions. The music Kern wrote for ShowBoat revealed character, had dramatic progression, and had style, tone, and form that allowed performers to expose deep, critical aspects of their characters.
Originally, ShowBoat was a book written by Edna Ferber. Hammerstein became inspired to write a musical based on a socially relevant story. Kern and Hammerstein wanted to create a musical that showed the injustice of racism and segregation. After Hammerstein had written the script, he showed it to Edna Ferber. She granted him the rights, and he started working on the first modern musical. Hammerstein wrote the script for ShowBoat in 1927. ShowBoat's first opening night was December 27, 1927. It was performed in the Ziegfeld Theater.
Before ShowBoat came on Broadway in 1927, what most of the shows that were on Broadway were revues and musical operettas and things that were just light and fluffy and singing and dancing girls and things like that. Shows like Hair was huge at the time because this was a time of extreme political unrest, extreme sentiments of anti-war. So it was huge. There were people that were very, very upset with Hair, and of course very anti-Vietnam. So that was very, very big. West Side Story was very, very big, and it was very interesting when West Side Story was originally written. It was written to be the Jews versus the Catholics. And then they thought, well, that really wasn't that relevant. And so they changed it to the Polish versus the Puerto Ricans, and the Poles were actually represented all the, the white kids, Anglo-Saxons in New York. Also, of course, Rent, that we're doing this summer. And that was very, very, very brave of these composers and lyricists and writers to write shows that have strong social issues in them. And I think it's very, very important.
Before ShowBoat, which was one of the linchpins of new musical theater, most of the shows were kind of what they call musical reviews, where they were comedy sketches tied to hit songs, and so there wasn't ever really a through line of these plays. We went just purely for entertainment. We didn't go for a story at all. Story wasn't really all that important. But a lot of amazing songwriters got their, start in these earlier, like Cole Porter. I think one of the things that I want to make sure is clear about Showboat is it was the first musical that integrated story, song, dance, and the story was most important. That was actually Oscar Hammerstein's contribution to it. And Oscar Hammerstein went on and wrote Oklahoma, which is the other musical that's considered the linchpin. If I were to say that any of my shows anywhere sort of are close to their shows, it would be giantly ego filled. However, I would say that I do try to tie in music and story in a way where if you lifted the song, you would know what the story was, and if you lifted the script, the songs wouldn't make any sense. That there is that sort of sense of integration that I do love and appreciate.
Kern and Hammerstein developed a new genre in theater by utilizing musical theater to create a serious work of art. Kern's music, which expressed characters' emotional state, along with Hammerstein's focus on lyrics and poetic verses, created a story with depth. This new genre was the model for many award-winning musicals written and performed since 1927. Using the stage to explore social issues can teach compassion and understanding for differences. Musicals like West Side Story, Rent, Fiddler on the Roof, and Next to Normal scream, "Don't hate people just because they're different." People walk away from these musicals reflecting just as they did in 1927 when Hammerstein decided not to raise the curtain at the end of Showboat for a curtain call. He didn't want the audience members to lose connection and a message of the story.